everyone, and welcome to the MFA Directing course talk online. My name is Dr. Benjamin Schostakowski, and I'm the head of directing. I'm really excited to welcome you to this session. Some of you may have been involved in the open day session we did a little while ago, virtually or in person. But this is a chance for us to kind of recap what the course is in its structure and overview. And perhaps more importantly as well, field some of your questions you might have if you're interested in applying and what that application process might be exactly. Before I go any further, I want to acknowledge the land that I currently am on, and I know that we're on different lands quite probably across Australia and maybe internationally, but I'm speaking to you from the Bidjigal and Gadigal land of the Eora Nation. And before we begin, I'd like to pay my respects to the peoples of that land and the elders of that land, past, present, and emerging. Any First Nations or Torres Strait people who are joining us today. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. I think it's important that we respect that sovereignty was never ceded on these lands, and that in a way there is a lot for us as storytellers and artists to continue to learn from our incredible history. So what I'd like to do now is spend about 10 minutes or so just talking through some of the basics of the course. And what I'm going to do after that is go to a bit of a live interview with one of our current directing students, whose name is Soule, and speak about their experience going through the course this year. If we can please hold most questions until the end, that would be fantastic. There's plenty of time for us to field some questions. I think you can type them into the chat and then they'll come through and we'll be able to talk them through at the end of the conversation at the start. The other thing is too that we've got a representative from the Student Services Department here at NIDA who knows everything you might be wanting to know about the technicalities about the application process and also what it might mean as a student from that point of view outside of the course and what it means to engage as a student if you come to NIDA. So let's kick off. First of all, one of the main questions we get with MFA directing is who is it that can apply? We're a master's course, a Master of Fine Arts course. And at the moment, the criteria for anyone who applies for this course, you'll either need initially to have completed an undergraduate degree, but that undergraduate degree can be in any field, ideally related to performance or the arts in some way, but it can be any field. And if that's not your situation, then the other criteria is that you have at least 5 years relevant experience in a related area, which is quite broad, actually. You know, you might be a writer, a dancer, you might be a musician, you might be a circus performer. It can be in any area. And if you're wanting to gear your career into directing, then you might be the perfect candidate. So some other things that we're looking for in our applicants, essentially we're looking for early career artists, and we're looking for artists who have a real driving passion and a real potential for directing what we would consider really compelling performance across all sorts of mediums. We're looking for artists who have different, diverse voices and perspectives on the world. As a national institute, we're interested in providing tools, if applicable, to artists who are able to go out into the industry and speak to it in a authentic way and contribute in a direct way to a much more inclusive society through directing art. We're looking for people who are dynamic, enthusiastic. We want people who are empathetic and collaborative in their approach to working with other artists. And we're looking for people who harness a type of creativity and entrepreneurship around how they might go about particular artistic endeavors. And then because the course is relatively small in how many students we will accept or give an offer to each year, we're looking for artists who've got a real passion to make an impact in the future of the industry. We're looking for people who not only might make a local or national impact, but we hope continue to make a global impact in what the arts can and should be through the role of a director. So a little bit about the course in overview, a little deeper. So this course, the directing course, the Masters is a new iteration of it that's been around for about 6 or 7 years, but a directing discipline at NIDA is a course that's been around next year in 2022 for 50 years. So we've got quite a significant milestone coming up for the directing course, which is very exciting. We believe that the impact of our training comes from how we train directors in a very rigorous and studio-based way. So primarily, there are a lot of seminars and discussions, but primarily your training is embodied by being in a theatre space or a rehearsal room, actually practicing by doing, and understanding and analysing by doing, and reflection. The other thing about this course is that it's embedded in real-world collaborative projects, which we think is integral. So some of the spectrum, I suppose, that the directors engage with includes initially an understanding of how you might prepare text-based theatre dramaturgically, then rehearse it with actors, how you might rehearse in a rehearsal room with actors, and then stage that production. But we look at both classical texts all the way through to much more contemporary and postmodern texts in the international paradigm, as well as the Australian paradigm. We do work for screen, in particular the Triple J Unearthed music video project that we've been doing for over 10 years now. We look at opera training and how to develop an idea to direct and design for opera. Live musical performance, we do a cabaret devised performance, which we do with NASDA, the First Nations and Torres Strait Dance College at Gosford. But we're also, of course, responding to where the world is right now with the need to engage with ways to reach audiences in the digital space. So that's becoming more and more another string to your bow that we're looking to skill you up in through the directing course. As you go through the course as well, there are many industry practitioners who will come in and act as your guest lecturers and mentors throughout the year. In a snapshot, the course, the master's course, is a 15-month course and it's full-time. The first year is, I suppose, the most intensive part of the course, which starts somewhere in February and goes up until December. And in that time, with some breaks throughout the year, you're working essentially full-time, 9 till 6, Monday to Friday, with some breaks, of course, throughout the week here and there. And you would be working in a small and intimate collegiate group at our campus in Kensington, Sydney, 5 days a week. The reason we make it the course so full-time in terms of its engagement is that it gives you the opportunity to truly and rigorously engage with all the other disciplines and artists who are here at the school. So you'll be working with, of course, the acting course. The directing course engages deeply with design, the technical theatre course, of course, and all sorts of other artists who will become your lifelong collaborators once you leave. A couple of other things I can touch on. Some of this information is already available online and you may be privy to it already, but I'll just give you a quick snapshot of our key discipline-specific subjects as well in the master's directing course. So at the core, I suppose, of the course is our directing techniques subject. So that subject lasts, like all of our subjects, throughout the entire course, and that course provides initially an intensive directing methodology. So there's 6 directors, or 6 to 8, I suppose, who might come into the course, will work with each other rigorously in the first couple of months of the course as actors, each taking a turn as a director, to practice in a rehearsal room environment what it means to actually begin rehearsing a production with a text step by step, and you'll be guided throughout that process. So by the end of that directing methodology intensive, you've got quite a comprehensive embodied experience of what it is to clearly take a group of actors and other artists through a rehearsal process as the director in the room. In directing techniques, the other aspects we look at, which are fundamental, we believe, are communication skills, to be a collaborative and clear communicator and an empathetic communicator to your colleagues, and also leadership skills, what it means to be a leader in this day and age, which now, of course, people are much more interested in finding soft skills around being a particular deep listener, a deep thinker, an active listener, somebody who can step back, read a room, work deeply with artists, and start to create something authentically inspiring by actually really spending time with your fellow artists and working with them and their skills. Directing practice is the other key subject in the course and is the largest subject in the course. So that spans all of the practical projects that you'll do throughout the course. Initially, we do a small 20-minute project with the Actor Centre Australia, where you'll start to put into practice that methodology. Then we do a whole spectrum of practical components for directors, which include working on the Triple J music video clip, as I mentioned, in Screen, directing Cabaret, which is a very exciting project we do with the diploma courses in musical theatre, and makeup and technical theatre. We do a Devise project, as I was mentioning before as well, with NASDA, which is largely around a site-specific performance and movement-based performance. And the most significant of those directing practice projects, of course, will be the graduation production that you do at the end of the course. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. There's 3 more subjects. The third is dramaturgy, which of course spans all sorts or modes of understanding the architecture of text as a director and how you might manage it, respond to it, and use that as a tool to shape how you direct. Initially, we look at shared vocabulary as artists about how we might talk about a text. Then we look at things like literary dramaturgy with the Sydney Theatre Company and how they develop new works for the stage. And we also look at production dramaturgy, where you have particular artists in the room with you who help shape a production as it unfolds in the rehearsal room process. The 2 remaining subjects are the contemporary director. That is a place for us to position, I suppose, our artistic work as directors and our collaborators in the social and political landscape that we're existing in. So part of that subject is recognizing context, really. So we look deeply at Australia and what it means to be a storyteller in Australia, and our ridiculously rich and deep history around storytelling, all the way up to contemporary performance directing in Australia. But we also look to international practice and leading directors in the world who have really given us some significant leaps and bounds in how we might approach what theatre form and content might mean, which of course then branches into other modes of art making as well. And the final subject in the directing course is sonography, which is a really important aspect for directors to have a real clear idea about, which is, of course, the aesthetics or how you might approach design or visual storytelling when you create productions. Now what I'd like to do is briefly talk through some of those key projects. The initial project that I spoke to you about is the directing methodology intensive. So that goes for a couple of months. It's really intimate in its approach for the fact that you'll only work with the other directing students initially. So as I mentioned, they'll act as your actors, and one at a time, you'll take turns at directing particular scenes from a production and stopping, starting again, trying, failing, and starting to skill up and build muscles for how you might run a rehearsal room based on a version of Stanislavski's active analysis that we've contemporized. And so we call it contemporary active analysis. The next projects you'll engage with are a long collaboration we've had with our colleagues at the Actor Centre Australia. So you'll put that methodology finally into practice with a 20-minute work following the initial methodology, but you can start to then innovate upon that methodology to start to bring your own voice into it, of course. And that's an arc that we hope continues throughout the whole directing degree, is that you can respond and be inspired by a particular step-by-step methodology, but ideally by the end of the course, you've developed what we would call your own directorial approach and voice. The NASDA project I spoke about, we previously have travelled to Gosford here in Sydney and worked with the First Nations and Torres Strait Dance Academy NASDA over a week, where we meet the artists there. We talk through some aspects of what it means to be collaborating, what First Nations context is, and how other artists might engage with that context. And then throughout a week, the directing course, as well as the performers from NASDA, collaborate together to create brand new works and present them at the end of the week, which is an incredible and very inspiring process. We also engage in directing cabaret. So you get a chance to understand what it might mean to direct a singer and work with a musical director. The Triple J music video we've spoken about, directing for opera and speaking with some artists from Opera Australia, for example, around what it means to read music and libretto and then direct a production in opera. Then a lot of practical projects too, where you may be acting as an assistant director on the major play productions that NIDA hosts in both June and October. And those directors are often industry directors and sometimes in-house directors, but you'll be paired in a very intimate and full-time way to work with those artists, working with often the third-year actors in the acting course and all of the other disciplines who help build main stage professional scale productions which are delivered to the public. Finally, in the course, as I mentioned before, you'll deliver as a director your graduation production, which is what the whole course kind of gears towards. That production we house in a festival, which we call the Festival of Emerging Artists, and you'll work with third-year designers. Each director works with a designer or a couple of designers to direct a brand new, fully realized 40-minute work. And we present those works in repertory around the end of the year, around December, which are open to the public. And that's a chance for you to, through practice, engage with live audiences and, importantly, the industry, to provide your particular approach to directing and get them excited about what it is you're interested in as an artist and your particular style in directing. There are also national and international engagements that this course deals with. So in the past, pre-COVID, that would mean traveling around and engaging face-to-face in international or national contexts. And in this environment, we continue to find versions of that, even if that means that we need to be more lateral in our thinking about how to engage internationally. Those engagements still exist in the course and provide legitimate connections for you in the international and national contexts. So two last things to go through. The Triple J Unearthed competition as a particular project, it's probably the second biggest project that the directors do in the course. I'll just briefly speak about how that works. So we've been lucky enough to collaborate with Triple J Unearthed and Rage through the ABC for over 10 years now, and they run a competition for emerging musicians, Australian musicians, and the winners of that competition from Triple J Unearthed all receive the opportunity to work with the directors and the third-year designers, who will essentially collaborate with them and create a brand new music video clip for one of their songs, which is then premiered through the ABC Rage and then out to the world digitally. So it's a real world-facing project, which is particularly exciting, and it gives a chance for each director to engage in an environment which is outside of course, the theatrical environment, but apply all of those skills that they've been learning throughout the year in terms of communication, creative ideas generation, thinking aesthetically, and thinking very creatively to come up with a particularly unique and compelling music video clip. So that happens towards around the September-October time in the year for the course. And then beyond that moment, you're starting to get much more stuck into the development and creation of your graduation production, which, as I mentioned, happens around mid-December. So that's a bit of a snapshot of some of the key aspects of the directing course. And And as I said, a lot of those things are available online and you may have read through them, but hopefully that gives you a bit more overview if you're really thinking about this application and wanting to understand a little bit more about what you actually do when you come into this course. What I'd like to do now is something a little less formal, talking through all those aspects, and have a conversation with a current directing student. I'll introduce them now. I'll let them introduce themselves, actually. And their name is Amy Soule. So I'll hand over to Amy, and then we might ask a couple of questions about their experience inside the course starting this year. Amy.
Hi.
Hi. How are you going?
Not too bad.
Very good.
Living my best lockdown life. Hi, for anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Amy Soule. I am a proud Wiradjuri Worimi person, and I'm a current directing MFA student.
Thanks, Amy. So I invited Amy on. I mean, we've been doing classes just today. Yes, unfortunately, we've been in this lockdown moment here in Sydney. But luckily, we found ourselves at a time of year where we're developing the festival, as we were talking about, your graduation shows, and we're doing sessions online with the other directors to kind of tease out those ideas. So that's pretty exciting that we get to be talking about, you know, what is to come once we see that light through the tunnel. But I thought it was a great opportunity to bring a current student in and just talk about, I thought, a few key aspects of the course. The first, I suppose, Amy, is the methodology that we all do and respond to at the start of the course, where we go, okay, you're coming into the course, you're a human, you've got your own world perspective, you may be an actor, you may be an artist, you may have done all sorts of approaches. We're going to talk you through a really comprehensive, a really detailed step-by-step process about how you might go about working with actors based on dramaturgy and then rigorously unpacking a text to stage it as a director. And then initially you can wrestle with that as a person and go, I like this aspect, I don't like this aspect, and you start to bespoke it, I suppose, in a way. But I'd be keen to ask you what your experience has been, starting with that particular approach at the top of the course for you.
Yeah, I think my interaction with contemporary active analysis is quite interesting because it's not what I expected it to be. When I applied for the course, I already had a master's in playwriting. I'd already studied acting. I kind of developed myself as an artist, and I was like, this is who I am. This is what I bring to the world. This is what my artistry means. And I had this pre-existing idea that I'd come in and this would I'd have to be forced into something that didn't quite fit me or who I was as an artist. And it was the opposite. So contemporary active analysis kind of gave me this framing, and the way that it's done in the course, the actively doing it and doing it with such a small group and cohort, it kind of allowed me to liberate my voice more as an artist. It gave me a framing to work within and explore within and use to be able to really articulate what I've been saying as an artist and what I will continue to say as an artist in a really specific and detailed way. Which I think is, for me, it's been incredibly liberating. Like I'm excited. Even today, when we were in classes and we were doing active dramaturgy at the moment, kind of going back to all of those foundation principles of active analysis, of getting something on the floor, of doing, of articulating the problem of a work, of really deeply understanding a work, and then being able to creatively expand from there. That's been my experience with it anyway, and I've really loved it.
Yeah, that's great. And I suppose another innovation that we tried this year in the course, which I think is certainly something we'll continue, is that we start with a case study, a particular play that we present to you that we think has got some interesting things to wrestle with dramaturgically. But the second step, which we tried this year, is of course that you as a director go, okay, here's a play that I personally love, and I'm going to now try that straight away with my colleagues and do the whole process again, but now with a play that's important to me. So you chose Love by Patricia Cornelius. Do you want to talk through what that was like? Because that was, again, still with your colleagues initially, but was with a text that you really wanted to do.
Yeah, it was really interesting because I had a pre-existing idea of what that text meant to me and kind of what Pat does as a writer. And so kind of applying contemporary active analysis once again kind of gave this framing to this work and to this playwright and to this this kind of story that I love to tell and love to explore, that made it very clear and succinct. It was just a methodology that was so strong, that worked really well. And I got to explore it twice. I got to really understand what the work is saying, what the work means to me, why I'm so attracted to this work, and then articulate it clearly for an audience to share that experience, which is directing, right? Like that is what directing is. And so it was just this kind of really profound moment of starting to really understand the impact that you can have as a director with work that you love, that means something to you. Yeah.
And then following on from that initial interaction with love and the directing colleagues, you then got to go, all right, the next step is to work with acting students who are going to be professional actors once they graduate, and then go, okay, this is no longer just my directing colleagues. I'm going to have to run a rehearsal room, start to apply this and see how it works in a way for real life. What was that experience like for you?
Deeply reassuring, and once again, just kind of already supported the tools that I had. Like my skill coming into the course, I trained as an actor, so my skill coming into the course was holding a room, right? Like that's what I was good at. I was good at just being able to hold space and create space. But what it enabled me to do was to give me a really clear structure that could then support what I was doing, rather than me just getting into a room and being like, Amy's just going to make creative chaos. Being like, Amy can still make creative chaos, but here is this very clear structure that we can also kind of then formulate a plan around. I even got much better at things like scheduling and things that I would deeply hate as a person. Like time is a construct, but it did, and it helped me a lot. And it really just started to really engage and level up that kind of interaction. And the actors loved it. Like they loved contemporary active analysis. Like they felt free in it and able to play and explore, so that says a lot about how the structure works, I think.
Yeah, great, because it is so actor-centric, as we kind of were saying. It's about, drawing out the best in them as opposed to only being there as a director's platform.
The exploration of it is, I think, really exciting for actors. This idea of getting to explore and actively doing something. You're not sitting there thinking, you're actively engaging in the work with the actors as a group. And I think that that's something really important.
Yeah, great. The other question I was going to say is, coming into the directing course, pretty soon in the course, you start interacting with all the other disciplines, which is pretty exciting. So you would have, of course, worked with the designers quite a lot now on various projects, and you are now right now for Triple J and soon with your grad show, but also you assistant directed in the June season on a play production, Metamorphosis. But what I'm interested in that is you were there in a rehearsal room full time. What your experience was like meeting all of the other disciplines who were training at NIDA.
Yeah, I think that there's nothing quite like it. There is nothing quite like the kind of the NIDA world of humans that you get to meet, because it's not even just all of the humans that I've met on the projects that I'm doing, on the rehearsal rooms that I get to be in, on what I'm kind of doing within the course, but it's even outside of the course. Like I'll randomly be at a theatre event and some designer will be like, I went to NIDA, you're a NIDA directing student, let's exchange Instagrams and have a chat about what artistically we like. Like there's this connection, there's an artistic connection between everyone that kind of goes to NIDA that I think is really helpful. And it's you get to know them so deeply throughout the project. So you get to really understand how designers kind of exist and function. And that's something that I'm deeply learning at the moment, working on the Triple J project, because your designers really are the core part of your team for that project. How their design world works and how, as a director, that relationship kind of develops. And doing it at this stage whilst I'm in a safe environment, whilst I'm getting to make mistakes and be like, oh, I'm learning too.
It's got, a legitimate sense of community that starts to build, I suppose, around the people that you're interacting with on all of those projects. Often people are in, really comfortable spaces, or they're in really steep learning curves, and everyone's kind of got each other's back going, we're all here together, we're going to make a show together, and that camaraderie, I suppose, gets going pretty quickly. All of this sounds pretty good, but I'd love to, I know that you're a particularly honest person. I'd love to say, you know, what's tough about the course? What's challenging for you as a directing student, Amy?
This has been deeply honest, and for anyone who knows me who watches this would be like shocked and horrified. I remember like so many people, like when I come out, I'm like, I really love being at NIDA, and they're like, yeah, but Amy, how is it? I'm like, no, I'm really happy and artistically. But like, there's challenges. There's challenges, as you would know, working with me, and how supportive you've been as a head of a course, I think has been really helpful for me. I'm both Black, neurodiverse, and disabled artist. So there's framings and things that I need that NIDA's been really helpful in shifting and changing and learning to adapt to support students, I think, in a really cool way, which I think has been a really big shift. I don't like structure or academics that much. So that's been a thing.
Yeah.
But it's been good. Like, I've learnt my way, and I've been able to actively do things and learn how I do it as an artist and get the support that I need. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose that's great to hear your kind of honest response there. And for every person who comes into the course, the challenges, I suppose, are going to be bespoke to them as a human being, you know. But one of the benefits of having a course with so small a cohort in a way is that support, we hope and we believe, is pretty rigorous for each of those individuals, and what it is for them to train throughout the year, and then also throughout the year, but also once they move into the industry and start making their careers happen, you know, it doesn't end in just the course. Okay, that's been great. Thank you for the chat, Amy. One other thing I think would be great as a last kind of question to you is about applying to the course, because people on the Q&A, you know, there may be a bunch of people here who are pretty keen on doing it, or maybe they're still thinking about it. What advice would you give to somebody who's pretty interested in applying?
Don't be nervous. And that's really easy to say, but the biggest thing is, who are you authentically as a human and as an artist? And you can't show that if you're nervous. So just be bravely yourself, and know that it is a really safe space. Know that you're coming into a place where Ben is a human being that will kind of, it's not a threatening application, and applications can very much feel that way. So they can very much feel intimidating, especially when you're on a panel, but it's not that. It'll just be a conversation, and it'll just be you as an artist. So really authentically use your voice, do the thing you love, show who you are, not what you think people want to see. That, I think, would be key, because that for key was me. I applied 2 times in a row. So, and I think that I learnt that much more the second time when I applied. What is my voice, and what do I want to say to this work? And then then that means that NIDA can know how they need to support me to become the director and artist that I'm going to be.
That's right. That's great. Thanks, Amy. That was really clear and great. All right, let's open up to, I suppose, a few questions if we've got any. I think they're going to come through the chat, and then of course you can ask me questions, you can ask Amy questions, and we'll be happy to field anything. So please send them through if anything comes up. One of the questions, just to kind of kick off, to get into that space, that has been coming through for this particular application round is, what texts can you choose to apply with? Because in the past we've had a pretty curated kind of lists. This year we've deliberately made a pretty considered decision that we're much more interested in artists to choose a play that's important to them. So we've opened up that choice of text entirely to be any published text that you think is something that you'd love to put on, that gets you excited. It can be from any particular cultural paradigm, any form, conventional drama, post-drama, opera, musical, contemporary dance text, screenplay. We wanted to just blow it right open to go, who are the interesting artists and humans out there in the world who've got something to say and are ready to come and skill up in that particular discipline. I can see one of the questions has come through. Can you see those questions, Amy?
I can.
Yeah. So I'll just read it out. It says, to Amy, how do you think the course can benefit directors with an interest in devising and making shows? Yeah, that's the first question.
This is interesting. I think it can definitely help. I think this is probably in a place where where the course could expand in. I think I come from a place of working a lot in devised work with different devised humans, but I think what the course does really well is it helps clarify your voice so that when you're devising with other artists, you know what that voice is. I also think it also, you start to work so closely with other people in the course that you start to articulate how your devised voice works. And like right now, Eve Beck, who is one of the other directors, I continually go to about my grad show, because the way that her brain works is very different to how my brain works. And so the creation of that is kind of the support that you get from your colleagues that you're in the course with, I think. You start to kind of do that kind of devising process. But I do think there can be more in the course in regards to creating full devised work without text, without anything, and kind of expand from there. That would be my thought, honestly.
Great. I'm just reading another question that's popped up here, which says, I was wondering how the course has changed under your leadership and how you want to see it continually evolve in the future. Look, I suppose one of the key things, how it might be changing, is that it's, I mean, the course has been going, as we know, for quite a long time, but we're in a world which is a very dynamic, disrupted, in a good way world, where new conversations are being thrown out front and center. Those conversations are around empathy, inclusivity, starting to open up what it means to respond to, for example, national heritage that isn't a 200-year-old heritage, to open up the theatre canon beyond something that's not Eurocentric, that's much more culturally connected to something that's international. So what I would hope, and I have to say it is a step-by-step process, and we're throwing ourselves at it, and we have, with actually the students as much as the teachers and the guest lecturers, started to say, hold on, in 2021 and beyond, directing and being a director means many, many different things to what it might have meant 10, 20 years ago. That the conversations are much more opened up and legitimately and necessarily much more empathetic to understanding different experiences in the world, but then doing what theatre has always done when it does do it well, which is provide audiences with the opportunity to think about the experience of the world somehow differently to how they might already experience it. They might find a new perspective or a new understanding to a particular situation or worldview that isn't already their own. So I hope through all of the practical projects, but initially the core place we can do that is in the methodology stuff too, at the start of the course, to go, hold on, what does it mean to actually speak with actors that come from any particular background or place in the world, or think or move differently or learn differently. If you're in the space as a leader, as a director, what does it mean to be able to navigate that space as an empowering leader? So I hope that the course continues to respond, of course, to a very dynamic world, both politically and socially, and throw in the mix the just as exciting stuff, which is in terms of form and theatre form and the way that we make shows and the experience of shows and audiences, which might be in a live theatre or site specific or online. How are you going about directing an audience experience for whatever an audience could be? So that kind of is also our aim through all of these projects, is curating an audience experience for what is a completely contemporary group of humans, and hopefully new groups of humans as well. I'll move along to a couple of other questions. One of the next ones is, what would you look for in a person wanting to join from a different industry, such as public speaking and training? I suppose what we'd want to look for, because you could come from, those industries are fantastic in the way that they're connected to already communication and working with other human beings to train them up. So we'd be interested to know what art you want to make. you might already have a bunch of skills that are completely applicable to collaborating with other artists and other humans. But we would want to know what gets you motivated as an artist. I suppose that's one of the first things we would talk about in your interview. Scrolling through a couple other questions. Are artists encouraged to apply again if they're not successful in the first application for the MFA? Amy, you can speak to that.
I was reading one of the other questions and I didn't hear what you said. What was it?
The question was, are artists encouraged to apply again if they're not successful in the first round, the first time they apply, I mean?
Yeah, well, obviously. I mean, I almost didn't apply because I was like, well, I didn't get in, but then I realized, and I spent the year going off and I did my playwriting masters in that year, which kind of just further developed my practice. And then by the time I came back, I kind of shifted and grown and learnt more of my voice to apply again. So yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the case, I suppose, probably for a bunch of the disciplines across NIDA, is that, it is a particularly competitive course. Each year we're looking for a really interesting, and we're surprised every year with the group of humans who do apply. We have no idea who it is who's going to apply. So even if you are not successful in your initial application, it absolutely doesn't mean that the next year or even the year after, you're not going to be in a much better place wherever you are in your life and your learning journey to be there at the right place in the right time. So absolutely. And there's things that I hope that applicants would think about and learn with each of their applications as well about how to improve their practice. And we keep it pretty conversational initially. So there's a bunch of things that we hope you can just take away to think about in terms of your art to put into your next application. Okay, a couple other questions. What is the structure of the course past December in the final months? Yeah, so I'll talk briefly to that. Once December happens, that's your graduation production at the moment. And then there's about 3 months which happen beyond that. At the moment, there's one significant practical project that we do early in the second year, and that's the collaboration with NASDA, where we go to Gosford and we devise with the artists at Gosford. So there's some prep around that, and then there's a week-long intensive. But beyond that, the face-to-face learning does go down slightly, and it's more of a time which is geared towards you starting to transition into the industry. And NIDA helps with that as much as it can to get you what might be assistant directorships, getting independent shows up, or getting, mid-range shows or professional shows up. Will try and push you into that space in those last 3 months. But there's also a particular research component, which is all about you and your practice, which is one of the subjects called generating research through practice, where you think about a particular idea that's probably embedded in your grad show that you want to know a little bit more about, and you do a bit of research about it. So those 3 months give you time to reflect on what you did in your grad show as well and start to write up that thesis to submit before graduation. Okay, a few more questions here. How many students from the current intake and previous intakes have applied for the course over multiple years? I couldn't give you an exact number off the top of my head, but Amy is one example who applied for the course twice, and certainly there are other applicants who've applied more than once over the last few years. So that tends to be a kind of common thread. Next question. I'm a trained actor with a BFA, but have no experience as a director. Should I get some experience in directing before applying? Look, if you've got a BFA in acting, that already meets one of the criteria to apply, of course, that you've got an undergrad degree. Also, acting is, of course, directly connected to the artistic process and creating theatre and working with theatre as a director. So there would be a bunch of things there that would be able to have a conversation upon already, I would think, even if you don't have too much directing experience. Amy, you also did actor training before you applied. So yeah, did you feel, I suppose you did, that you're in a space where you could talk about directing process, having learnt so many of those tools in acting?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think that being an actor has just benefited me tenfold going into director training. Obviously, I did then go and do playwriting masters because I think what was missing from acting training, I was be able to be embodied and I understand how to exist, but taking myself out and re-looking at structure and dramaturgy and text work in a bigger picture that's not fully in the work, I think was what I needed. That was the experience I needed, just a moment to take myself out. But if you're already an actor that can do that, I mean, you're totally fine, I think. Yeah, that'd be my thought.
Okay, a couple of other questions. So one here is, I'm a non-fiction author and working on semi-fiction story. Will this help me getting the story produced eventually? One answer is maybe, I suppose. We've certainly had directing applicants who are writers come into the course. I mean, Amy, again, is an example of a writer who's come into the course. And they're producing through NIDA, their work for their grad show. So I suppose the answer to that is yes. That is possible. Next question about applications. What does published text mean in terms of if you want to present or are more inclined to devise work that starts from little? I haven't read numerous plays. Yeah, that's a good question, because there are plenty of artists who apply and want to be theatre makers who work in that devised capacity. A published play, I mean, I think the advice there would be there are plenty of devised works that have been created from little, as you say, and then there's some type of outcome from what that production would be. So our encouragement is, if you can come into the interview and absolutely say, hey, look, I want to work in a devised capacity, but we're interested in, as a conversation piece, if you picked up, for example, a published outcome of a devised work by a devised theatre company that you're really inspired by, if you can speak to that published work and how you might direct it, or how you might create a work that's similar to it, but at least you've got some material that already exists in order to mine deeply about how you might deal with it as a director, like what the structure of that work might be, what the form and content of that work might be. And that's certainly not to say that we're not interested in applicants who are interested in devising work. So I hope that kind of answers your question. Okay, I've got a few more questions. What kind of support is given for students that may be working in the industry with programmed independent shows for 2022? Well, I suppose case by case, we speak to the applicants about what their scenario is. So the commitment to the course is certainly that. It's a pretty full-time commitment. And in some cases, if you are unavailable for chunks in the year where we do our major projects, that may present a problem for your ability to do the course in that year. And in that case, we may say to you, look, that sounds like a great project, go ahead and do it and come back to us. Or there may be a negotiation where it can work. So I suppose we would check in on that case by case. Okay, just going through. What would it look like to navigate a course as a performance maker, performer, as well as a maker, in brackets? Maybe that's a question for Amy. What do you reckon, Amy? What would it look like to come into the directing course if you wanted to be, I guess, both an actor and a performance maker?
It's a really good question. I'm not sure. It depends. Can I, like, in what way do you mean? Like, what would it look like to navigate the course as a performance maker? How do you interpret that, Ben?
Well, look, I suppose we've got plenty of people who come into the course to learn skills in directing as a discipline, but have come through as an actor initially. And the way for them to navigate the course is usually quite easy, for the fact that they know what it's like to be on the other side, to be on the floor as a performer being directed or creating. There are plenty of opportunities in the practical aspects of the course to work deeply collaboratively. For example, on the Triple J project, you may move into that going, look, I really want to work with designers in a very equal creative place where all two or all three of us develop this from the ground up. and work in that way as a performance maker, as opposed to being siloed as a director with actors. We've also had people in the past too who develop their performance career and continue to do that beyond learning to direct. One of our previous graduates, for example, was a circus performer in Cirque du Soleil before they came to the course, and they wanted to skill up directing. They did, and they continue to both direct and also work as a circus performer for other directors.
It does, for me as an actor, it does definitely make me a better actor. Like, just deeply understanding directing just means that I understand, like, in a different way how the whole structure of a work comes together. And so it kind of just has, yeah, pushed and expanded me as a maker, I think. Yeah.
Okay, another two-part question. One is, how much detail would you like to see in our portfolio of previous work? And the second bit is, and if we don't have much experience with directing, what would you like to see other examples of work that isn't directing? So this is about the application materials, I suppose, in more detail. The portfolio of previous work, how much detail? We just want to see whatever you think is going to support your application in telling us and showing us and speaking to what you've done in the past. That doesn't mean that you have to have been necessarily the director on those projects. You could say, hey, look, I did this devised thing in my undergraduate degree or at a student theatre company, or I did it on my iPhone and I entered it in a film festival. It can be any work. That doesn't have to mean, it doesn't have to mean that you directed it per se, but somehow you were artistically involved. So we want to know examples of stories that you've engaged with and somehow artistic product that you might have made that somehow has inspired you or given you some more development in your thinking as a director, somebody who creates work for some type of audience experience. The second part is, if we don't have much experience with directing, would you like to see other examples of work that isn't directing? Yeah, and I guess I kind of touched on that in the first question. I think that's absolutely applicable, that if you don't have too much background where you were specifically in the role of the director, but you did other roles, that's very interesting to us. We certainly want to hear from you and what those other experiences were. Okay, I'm not sure if I've missed any of the other questions.
You missed one that was for me that I'd like to answer.
Yes, I think I can see it here. Do you want to read it through? You can see it. I just highlighted it.
Yeah, did you? It's not highlighted. Anyway.
Oh, no.
Hi, Amy. If you're comfortable, I would love to know about your experience being a neurodivergent person while studying this course and any support you have. So my really honest answer to that is NIDA doesn't quite have the frameworks in place to fully support neurodiverse and disabled artists. There's still, I mean, ableism just exists as a whole. However, I do think it's shifting and changing a lot. I do think that NIDA is kind of developing and growing its idea of how to support artists and what artists need to really kind of do their best work. I've also found Ben incredibly helpful in his leadership position as course leader, me being like, I can't do this, I don't know how to do this, let's navigate a way for me as a director to kind of figure out the way that my brain works. And not just in a way where I feel like I'm being like othered or I'm not doing the way that it's meant to be, in a way that's like exciting and exploring how my neurodiversity works, to be like, oh, okay, I can do it this way, and that may even be a better way for a lot of other people. Let's kind of explore it and we'll kind of adapt and shift. But there does need to be more done. Yeah, that would be my honest answer. Ben, did you have an answer?
No, I think that's quite clear, Amy. You know, you've spoken honestly about where you think NIDA's at, and, you know, I would agree that there's a whole bunch of shifting that needs to go on across, you know, all of our industries and our training institutions, and that NIDA, you know, is taking it pretty seriously, and there's a way to go, you know. But that's certainly true. You know, any applicant, particularly if I can speak for directing, who comes into the course and has that lived experience, you know, our main drive will be, we want to know who you are as a human and how you operate, and then, you know, how we can provide tools for you to be a better director or a stronger director. That's our main goal. So yeah, we will continue to improve in that area, absolutely, and we need to and we want to. Okay, we're going to start to wrap up in 5 minutes. I probably have missed a couple of things. I can see one more thing here. Does the portfolio need to include video footage of our past work? It doesn't need to, but that would be great. If you've got video footage, yeah, we'd love to have a look at that. That makes sense. There's another question here about the COVID world. Yes, unfortunately, that's a world that we're dealing with at the moment. How has the lockdown forced the course to change? And do you see any of those changes becoming part of the pedagogy in a post-COVID world? It's forced us to change because at times we can't leave our homes. So yes, we've had to do some teaching online. And in terms of pedagogy, I think absolutely it would be naive of us not to say that as artists, we've got to start to figure out when and if we do find ourselves in these radically changed situations, how do we continue to do the work that we want to do and share ideas with audiences. And certainly all of our industries, the screen industry, the theatre industry, they're all grappling with this, and largely under much struggle, they found really exciting and innovative ways to do that, to get work out digitally. It's hard work and everyone's learning it for the first time in a lot of ways. So as we move forward in the course, I think it's kind of fundamental that we don't spend, we'll look at a whole bunch of different approaches and modes to directing, and certainly one of them needs to be understanding a little bit more about the digital space. That's certainly part of our existence now, and we've started to look at briefly too, Amy, maybe you want to speak, we're going to wrap up in a minute, but we've just started to open up conversations with companies, for example, who are working with gaming engines to start to create worlds and develop work. So that's only an early conversation in the course so far, but what's your experience with that been so far?
Yeah, it's been really exciting. There's this sense of innovation at NIDA that's kind of really inspiring and exciting. So we kind of are exploring kind of what the future of storytelling would be when we've got platforms like things going on in Unreal Engine, actors being put as real kind of fully made models for after they die, living in space. What does that mean for directing? How does the digital world interact with the theatrical world? And it's been really exciting, sometimes terrifying, but really kind of invigorating as an artist to be like, oh, there's all of these other ways that we can continue expanding, which I think just has benefits as well in many different ways. Yeah.
Thanks, Amy. I'm going to start to wrap up now. We've also, in the last kind of 2 minutes, we've got a rep from Selka here. Kylie, in case anybody's got any practicality questions about their application, we'd invite any of those through. They can. Oh, you can speak right now in the chat, I understand. So those questions I think are already going through to Selka, which is great. The other thing we'd love to say is, applications are open now for next year. Our digital doors are open. So if you've got any questions about what that application is, or you want any advice, please send it through to the applications team. And we're very happy to have a chat to you about your app in the prep. And we're really looking forward to seeing a bunch of interesting humans, whoever you are, whatever you're interested in, put up your hand and go, this is the year I'm going to give it a red hot go. We'd be very keen to meet you and hopefully see you come into the course. The website, rather the email that Kylie's just put up, if you've got any of those questions, is applications@nida.edu.au. So please send through any questions you've got whatsoever. And if we missed any of them today in the chat, sorry about that, please do send them through and we'll be able to follow up with you all. Stay safe, everyone. I think that's kind of it for now. Thanks, Amy, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And we look forward to seeing you all in your application and interview. Thanks, everyone.